Blog Talk Radio.
Are you ready to take a bite out of the competition? Are you looking for ideas to make your business better? Welcome to the Core Business Show with Tim G.I.A, sponsored by Apple Capital Group. At the core of every successful business, you'll find people making a difference. And with each episode of the Core Business Show, we talk with those people, examine those ideas, and explore the strategies that make them special. Now, the host of the Core Business Show, Tim G.I.A.
Good morning and welcome to another edition of the Core Business Show. I'm Tim G.I.A, your host. Today I have the pleasure of having Alec Harris. He was the president of G.I.A Music out of Chicago. We're going to talk about the new book called Lead Me, Guide Me. It's in its second edition after 25 years, and it's a great book. Alec, welcome to the program.
Thanks. Happy to be here.
Great. I guess to take us to the very beginning, if you don't mind, tell us a story about yourself and about G.I.A, how you guys came to be.
Sure. Well, G.I.A is a family-owned and run business. We have been in business since 1941. It's kind of funny. We started actually as a correspondence course teaching church choir directors how to do Gregorian chant music. So a lot of people don't know that G.I.A stands for the Gregorian Institute of America. After the Vatican II reforms of the 60s, of course, Gregorian chant became a little bit less popular, went a little bit out of style. The company struggled a little bit, and so the original founder, Clifford Bennett, looked to put the company up for sale. And my father was, at the time, kind of third generation in the music publishing world. He worked for another company called Carl Fisher, but didn't have any ownership in that company and was looking for something he could actually afford to purchase. So it was a match made in heaven. My father was able to purchase the Gregorian Institute. And then right away, he partnered up with Bob Battistini to be the main editor of G.I.A and kind of set us on the path. Just simplify the name to G.I.A and then start us on the path of publishing a wide diversity of music, including what led to the first edition of Lead Me, Guide Me.
Wow, that's an amazing story. And you guys have a huge collection of all types of music. What type of categories? I know you're really big on education as well. Kind of tell us what type of other products you normally have.
Sure. Yes, we've got two divisions. We've got kind of a secular music education division that publishes everything from early childhood music curricula to college level teacher training textbooks to music aptitude tests, band methods, that sort of thing. And then on the sacred division, of course, we have about 6,000 or 7,000 choral octavos in print, books, recordings, everything from Gregorian chant still, of course, to early classical music, up through, of course, contemporary music, folk music, everything in between. So it's a huge, diverse set of music, but it's just a lot of fun to be a part of that. And I've been with G.I.A since 1987. So I started right when the first edition of Lead Me, Guide Me published.
Wow. So, like usually the second generation come into a company, did your dad give you a hard time, and they don't like to give easy breaks to their kids and say, hey, you go to the mailroom and work yourself up?
Yes. I think my first job was out in the warehouse in a kind of un-air conditioned space, just kind of putting together folders and alphabetizing things. It was a miserable job, summer job when I was in college. But my background actually is in journalism. I didn't think about coming into the family business as a kid, and it was really only after I was out in the real world for a couple of years doing newspaper work in the Washington, D.C. area that I realized that there were some things that I learned about publishing and journalism that I could apply to the music publishing world. And so my dad, I think, was very wise. He was not easy on me, but he also gave me some freedoms. And he, when I first came on in '87, he asked me to take leadership on our music education division and gave me a lot of freedom to build that side of the company up, and then kind of slowly worked into the sacred music side. So he was very wise. He's been a great mentor and teacher. My dad's 77 years old now, and but he still comes in. He still likes to, check the mail, talk on the phone, surf the internet, and tell me all the things I should be doing differently from what I'm doing. So So he's good. He's been a great mentor and someone who's taught me a lot.
Well, tell us about before we get to kind of segue before Lead Me, Guide Me, how you guys, from where you began at, before you got there from the 80s, I know you built the education, the building where it is today, portfolio, and also continue to, with the sacred music portion. What separates your company a lot differently from the other publishers out there?
Well, I like to think that we continue to focus on what's right and what's best for the church on our sacred music division. I think we've been looked to as publishers of music of extremely high quality. We care a lot about the editing that goes into our editions. I think that we've really distinguished ourselves with our choral publishing, just the quality and the diversity of our choral music for use in churches. And then also, of course, we're the major publisher of hymnals that are used in the Roman Catholic community, and that's a little different from our competitors who mostly publish those kind of more disposable newsprint missalettes. Mm-hmm. So we're the premier publisher of hymnals that are used in Roman Catholic churches around the country.
Wow. So you have a really niche there, big niche. Well, going to also in the 80s, I mean, to segue, I'm sure that during that time, you guys had a lot of big hits from Leon Roberts' Mass of St. Augustine. Mm-hmm. And, of course, you had the energy you had with David Haas and also Marty Hogan. Marty Hogan's Massacration really propelled you guys to a new level. Was all of that help you kind of segue into considering Lead Me, Guide Me 1? I'm sure during that time, all of the success that you guys had, and you know this is going to be a new market for you altogether, an unknown market. Did that kind of help you prepare you for that first edition?
I think definitely. I think also we had published a more traditional hymnal called Worship, and that was our first hardbound hymnal, and I think we realized that it didn't serve the needs of all Roman Catholics. The Catholic Church is, one of the things that's great about it is its incredible diversity, and we couldn't have one hymnal that would fit all the needs of the diverse Roman Catholic Church. And it was pretty clear to us initially that we had to do more. And also, I think that, to be honest with you, we just love the repertoire that is what's sung in African American churches. And we felt like we took a chance, to be honest with you. When Lead Me, Guide Me first came into fruition, we really had no idea how that book would be received. And much to our enormous pleasure, it was a huge hit and very well received, but we really just didn't know. There was really nothing like that before. And so we were taking really a big risk, but it really came out of just our love of the music and and an opportunity to take that best of that music and put it together in a single hymnal.
Wow. So it was a real successful publication, and I think you followed later about that publication to a CD, ironically, which was really surprised and which was recorded in 2 days at St. Augustine.
Yeah.
Leon was telling me about that story.
Yes.
When you guys took that risk of Lead Me, Guide Me 1, I mean, you just only had at that time, I think you just mentioned Worship, which is one segment of the Catholic Church. Was Gather out by then?
It was also just starting as well. So that was another side of it, which was more of a piano-based, as opposed to Worship is more organ-based. Gather, of course, a little bit more contemporary and piano-based. And that was just also released around the same time.
So you guys...
The two projects are started more or less at the same time.
Wow. So you guys were really, really probably nervous because then you had two new projects coming out, and it's expensive to print books. But it became very successful, a good risk that paid off and continued to pay for you for many years to come. And then your third edition of Gather and your second full edition with Lead Me, Guide Me. When you did Lead Me, Guide Me, the first edition, what was once you published that particular edition, how was it really received? Did you get fast networking, or did it kind of move in like in a steady pace, then all of a sudden start picking up as the years went by?
I think it was pretty much of a hit right from the first moment the book came out. But even from that first moment, it was clear that there was a lot of opportunity to do more, because one of the things that happened is when we had a kind of a launch event, and the people who worked on Lead Me, Guide Me, were part of the committee and helped us choose the music and edit the contents. One of them stood up at the initial launch meeting and said, here it is, this is our book. We're so thrilled for this to be in print. But of course, we don't actually really sing the music the way it appears in the book. And I think when they said that, my dad kind of had a heart attack because, of course, there's a tradition in African American communities of, not necessarily following line for line these 4 square hymns. And that's what we had put in the book. And so I think from that point, we really realized that there was an opportunity to kind of codify the way that these hymns are sung in African American churches. We did some research, and of course, the way things are sung are not the way that they were engraved and printed in the first edition of Lead Me, Guide Me. But the differences were the same if you were in California, in Texas, in New York, or in Chicago. The differences were uniform. And so we actually began a process of putting the music in notation in the way it's actually sung in African American communities. And that resulted in a book that we published for Protestants called the African American Heritage Hymnal. And that came out about 10 years ago. So that was another huge 8 to 10 year process for that hymnal. And so now with Lead Me, Guide Me second edition, we had the opportunity to build on that experience, but also create a book that, taking advantage of the best new music that's been composed, and of course being respectful of all of the new order of Mass texts and all the new settings using the new order of Mass texts and the great kind of traditional hymnody in the Roman Catholic world as well. So it's kind of a book that really bridges and builds on everything that we've learned as a publisher of hymnals going back more than 25 years.
Wow. That's amazing. We're going to take a break real quick and be back at the commercial break with Alec Harris, president of G.I.A. Be back in one moment.
You're listening to the Core Business Show, sponsored by Apple Capital Group. Apple Capital Group in Jacksonville, Florida, is a commercial lender that specializes in asset-based loans, equipment leasing and financing, invoice financing, commercial real estate loans, and asset-based financing in the U.S. and Canada. Apple Capital Group is a direct lender that lends on their private equity investment portfolio. 90% of most loans are decided within 2 hours, and vendor funding within 24 hours after documents are completed, with a one-page application. No slow no's, just a quick decision and a fast yes. To get more information about lending from Apple Capital Group, call 866-611-7457. That's 866-611-7457 to speak with one of our loan specialists. Or visit us right now at applecapitalgroup.com. Welcome back to the Core. Once again, here's Tim G.I.A.
Again, we're back with Alec Harris, president of G.I.A. Alec, before we get to dive right into Lead Me, Guide Me 2, when you guys decide to do the Lead Me, Guide Me 1 CD, what inspired that?
Well, I think that was going back to the fact that a lot of the music, a lot of the customers of Lead Me, Guide Me First Edition aren't just African American communities. Mm-hmm. It was really a book that was widely used beyond the African American community, and was really the first time that there was a hymnal for Catholics that could kind of help bridge some of those divides and create more opportunities for folks to learn repertoire. But the problem was this issue of the music in the books not really being notated the way it's actually sung, just like I had been talking about. So we realized that people needed to have oral, sound models, that recordings would be a big help in just showing folks, especially white folks, basically, who aren't as familiar with some of the cadences, et cetera, how these songs really sung and used. And so we started working with Leon Roberts, who is fantastic, one of the great composers, just a wonderful human being and just an incredibly talented individual, and started talking with him about creating some recordings of the music in Lead Me, Guide Me. And that resulted in the CD sets.
Wow.
And those also have been very, very successful. Of course, Leon is such a talented musician, he even took things to another level, and some of the music is so beautifully done, but also I think it's maybe a little intimidating to the average parish musician, but it's just another great set of recordings.
Well, they have a lifetime to learn it.
Yes, they do.
The different style. So he did take it to another level. 25 years later, Lead Me, Guide Me Too. I know there's been a lot of outcry and demand for many, many years to say, when we're going to get, I've used this book to 5 times over, and I'm out of repertoire. And some of them did use as a supplement the African American Heritage book. Now, we know part of that time it took you guys to do this. We're going to be fair. You did have a text change with the Roman Missal, so it was just wise to just weigh that out across the board. So we're going to be fair about that. That probably did add more time to it, and it took them years, a decade, to come out with the official text.
Right.
And we just
we didn't want. That's right. We didn't want to publish a book and then have it be obsolete a year or two after. That wouldn't serve anybody at all. So we had to wait.
Okay. Tell us about Lead Me, Guide Me Too.
Well, there's so much in this book it's really, I think, it brings what we've done with Lead Me, Guide Me to a whole new level. First thing, of course, what we've been talking about is there are a lot of new settings of the Order of Mass by composers like Ken Lewis, Nora Duncan, Roger Holland, but also some of the most beloved, like the Mass of St. Augustine by Leon Roberts. So we've got brand new settings and adapted settings of the Order of Mass. One of the things we're most excited about is Psalter. So, of course, every Catholic liturgy, they sing what's called a responsorial psalm, and that psalm is on a 3-year rotation of different psalm refrains and verses. And we've done settings by some of the best, finest African American composers for that entire 3-year Psalter. And all of that music, and it's fantastic music, is in this hymnal. And we actually think that this is something that's going to be widely used throughout the Catholic Church, not just even for people who adopt Lead Me, Guide Me. It's a huge, very ambitious 6-year or longer project. So we're very, very excited about that. Of course, it has that notation, what we've talked about before, where it's really the notation of the music reflects how the music is actually performed and sung in African American church communities all over the country. And then we have a lot more repertoire from the world church, from the Caribbean, from Africa, music that's been collected by, say, the Iona community and others, some wonderful, wonderful repertoire. There are even a few bilingual hymns in here, which are English and Spanish, and there's some other kind of core repertoire, a lot more what we kind of would say standard hymns that are pretty much universally used throughout the Roman Catholic world. And so it's an extremely ambitious, it's a big book. And another thing that's which is great, which is maintained from the first edition of Lead Me, Guide Me, is all of the hymns are notated in parts. So in our other hymnals for Catholics like Gather and Worship, the Pew edition, you just see the melody line of the music and all the text. But in Lead Me, Guide Me, of course, in a lot of African American communities, there's a tradition of singing in 4 parts by the assembly, soprano, alto, tenor, and bass. And so in the Pew edition of Lead Me, Guide Me, you see the full, what's called SATB, or the full harmonic musical content for every hymn in this hymnal. So it's just an incredible wealth of great repertoire, and it really, I think, it's going to be around. This book is going to be around for many, many years to come.
Wow. So since you already have it in a Pew edition, so there won't be a choral edition, but will there be a keyboard edition coming later?
Yes. So there's going to be a keyboard edition, the separate Psalter, it's called, just the psalm settings. And we're actually going to be releasing an app version. So it's for your iPad, which we're excited about. So if you have an iPad and you don't want to carry a heavy book around with you everywhere, you'll be able to download it through our app called Hymnal and get Lead Me, Guide Me that way.
Wow. So that's for the keyboard edition and also as well as the the Pew edition?
Yes. So they'll both be available through the app.
Okay. Any launch dates on those yet?
So the keyboard edition, the physical keyboard edition, should be ready early fall. By the way, the Lead Me, Guide Me second edition is officially being released later this week at the National Black Catholic Congress in Indianapolis, which is a once every 5-year event. So we're really excited about that, and that book is brand new, literally just came in, and official release is on Thursday at that conference. And then we have, in addition to the keyboard edition early fall, the Psalter also in early fall. Those are all coming along really nicely. And then the app versions probably also maybe September, October range as well.
So the Psalter edition, there would be some psalms in the full set of psalms in the Lead Me, Guide Me too, but it's not going to be all written out. It's just going to be kind of segmented, just with the antiphon and or the verses going to be included. Okay.
So
just the antiphon and some with the words.
Right. So in Lead Me, Guide Me second edition, the antiphon or the psalm refrain is in the Pew edition, but the verses, which are typically sung by a cantor, are in the separate in the separate edition. So the verses aren't in the Pew edition.
And that edition will be out also during the fall?
Yes. And another thing I think that's really great about Lead Me, Guide Me is a very comprehensive set of indexes. And this is, I think, again, taking the book to a whole new level, cross-referencing every hymn and song with scripture, with topics. So you can look up a topic like diversity or ecology or family life or faith in Jesus Christ. You can see different hymns that correspond to those topics. There's a kind of a whole liturgical planning tool so if you're planning a worship for second Sunday of Advent, cycle C, you can see a list of suggested music for that Sunday. So they're really great, very comprehensive, and wonderful planning tools that are part of the indexes at the back of the hymnal. So, and those we used a whole team of scholars, including Father Ron Chrisman, who is one of our editors, used to work at the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops office, and is really an incredible scripture scholar. So the indexes are just fantastic.
Wow.
They make up about 50 pages, I think.
Wow. Yeah, I'm looking at it now. You start with the table of contents. You have the Liturgy of Hours. You have the morning praise, the evening, also the night, and then your set of psalms. And then you have the rituals of the church, which is the sacraments, initiation, baptism, communion outside of Mass. You have the exposition and benediction, reconciliation, anointing of the sick, marriage and funerals. Then the Mass settings, you have a whole section of Mass settings. There's really diverse. So I see right here the Mass of St. Augustine. Did someone update with the new text for the Mass of St. Augustine?
Yes. So, of course, Leon Roberts passed away before the new texts were released, and so we did work with those texts and our team of editors, and luckily for that particular Mass setting, it was pretty easy to adapt them to the new text. So we were able to do that work, and so yes, it's all with the new text.
So it's the complete edition of the Mass of St. Augustine?
Yes.
And see, of course, you have the Sound of My People, Unity Mass by Nora Duncan, Roger Holloman's Sound of the People. Then you have a new one I haven't seen before, Welcome Table.
Yes, that's a wonderful Mass by Kim Harris and Roger Holland, and it's all based on spiritual melodies. And it's an incredibly infectious Mass setting we're very excited about.
And tell us about Come Go With Me. Who is that by?
That's also by Ken Lewis, and it's a brand new setting that we've just launched for this hymnal. It doesn't appear anywhere else. We're going to be publishing it separately, but Ken Lewis is one of the editors of this hymnal and showed us that setting, and everyone just thought it was fantastic. So we're very excited about it and being able to include it in this hymnal.
Well, so you have, and then you have the two revisions, one by him and Leon Roberts. Then you have the Mass of Creation and the Community Mass. And that
harkens back to creating a common repertoire in the Catholic Church, and I think it's pretty well established that those are the two major settings that are used virtually universally in English-speaking Roman Catholic churches. And so one of them, of course, Mass of Creation by Marty Haugen, which is universally loved, and then the Community Mass by Richard Prue. And so this is just, again, part of the vision of the hymnal to create continuity, Roman Catholic worshipers of all stripes, and it was just part of that vision.
Great, and because we have the diocesan events, and that becomes really, really handy. And then your traditional series of hymns and songs. Then you Actually, when you mentioned earlier regarding the indexes in the back. Last part of the whole thing, what are you guys looking to achieve with Lead Me, Guide Me To?
Well,
besides selling and, evangelization, I'm going to help you out.
Well, ultimately, my dad had a saying, if it's great for the church, it'll be good for G.I.A. And the vision really, starting with Archbishop Wilton Gregory, who was the honorary chair of our hymnal committee, and Monsignor Ray East, who was the chair of the committee, on down, everybody. We wanted to create the best possible book that we could for African American Catholics. And the thought is that if we were able to do that and achieve that, the sales will take care of themselves. And my dad had a saying, if it's good for the church, it'll be good for G.I.A. And this is definitely part of that. And so this is one of 4 hymnals that we're working on. We have the new edition of Worship, which you mentioned, the new edition of Gather, which you mentioned, and then in addition to Lead Me, Guide Me, we're also publishing a book called Oramos Cantando, which is the first ever 100% bilingual hymnal, English and Spanish. So every hymn is translated English to Spanish or Spanish to English by real poets, and that's been another 10-year labor of love for us. And that'll be out this fall.
Wow. We have a question right quick regarding the app. Is the app going to be purchased separately, or you're purchasing it with the book?
Okay, so the app is free. It's called Hymnals. And then through the app, you're able to purchase the individual hymnals that you want. And so the retail price of Lead Me, Guide Me is $15.50 as the Pew edition, and the price of the app version, once you purchase and once you download for free the Hymnals app, you'll be able to purchase Lead Me, Guide Me at that same price through the app, if that makes sense.
Wow, it does. Anything else you would like to leave us with?
Well, I'm happy to talk to you about this. Thank you for giving me the opportunity. We are extremely excited about this and love to get your feedback, the feedback of your listeners once you've had a chance to look at the book, start using it. We'd love to hear back from you, and thank you again for the opportunity.
Oh, thank you again. Thank you, Alec. I really appreciate it.
All right.
Okay, take care.
Thanks
again, Alec. Thank you. Take care. Again, Alec Harris, president of G.I.A. Music in Chicago, Illinois. Thank you for listening to the Core Business Show. I'm Tim G.K., your host. You can download this episode on iTunes on Blog Talk Radio. Thank you for listening. Everybody have a great day. Take care.
Thank you for listening to the Core Business Show with Tim G.K. For a free quote on equipment leasing and financing, visit our website, applecapitalgroup.com. That's applecapitalgroup.com. And fill out the information to receive your free quote. We hope you'll join us for our next episode. And remember, you can always get to the core via iTunes. You'll find all our previous episodes there. Thanks again for listening to the Core Business Show with Tim G.K.